Well, we are talking today with Ohio Supreme Court Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor. Thank you for joining us today for our Take 10.
My pleasure, thanks.
First question is the big story that's happening right now is the confirmation hearings of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. What is your viewpoint on whether a new Supreme Court justice should be seated during a presidential election year?
Well, you know, this is not a question that would ever come before the Ohio Supreme Court. This is not, a decision that we would have to make. In fact, it's not a decision that anyone other than the Senate is making. And as we talk, they are proceeding with the hearings. Whether I don't like to opine on things I have absolutely no control over. And like the rest of, the citizens of the United States, we have no control over this at the moment.
Well, something that you have been working on, Chief, is criminal justice reform. And back in July, you wrote an article where you quoted John F. Kennedy saying, "Life is not fair, but our government must be," which I thought was just so fitting for the time that we were in back in July and where we are today. Do you think our government is fair when it comes to criminal justice?
There's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. I think the closer we examine and scrutinize what is happening in various communities, various systems across the country, I think it becomes abundantly clear that there's much room for improvement. Now, the question is how you get to that improvement. And there's obviously different ways to do it. But one of the things that I'm a big advocate for is data collection so that we have solid data to guide how we need to improve our systems. And when I say improve our systems, I'm not just pointing a finger at police or the court system or the criminal justice, maybe incarceration, etc. I'm talking about the whole system. And every system that we have in this country can be reduced to data and inform us then on how it's functioning, how it's effective, how it's meeting the dictates of the statutes that reflect policy and how that's occurring. So the first step, let's collect the data. Let's collect it from our criminal justice partners. Let's collect it from the courts. Let's actually see where there's disparities and why are there disparities? What's the reason? And is that reason race?
That's a lot of data, and certainly a project that's not going to be done, say, tomorrow. So in the meantime, a couple of weeks ago, the Ohio Criminal Sentencing Commission, I believe, presented their formal recommendations, right? How do we, A, collect that data, but then B, how do we develop this model of a uniform felony sentencing guidelines? Break that down for the layman person in Ohio, right? What does that look like then?
What we're doing in conjunction with the Sentencing Commission is to attempt to gather the data that I just spoke about. We are starting out with a pilot county, a judge in Allen County, Judge Reed, who's volunteered to take the sentencing entry, which requires a lot of data to it, and utilize that. Find out what works, what doesn't work in that collection process, in the tallying of the information, and that will inform then the Sentencing Commission on what the document should look like going forward. And so it's important to keep an open mind. It's important to realize that that pilot county will be working with academics from the University of Cincinnati to put together a comprehensive and relevant document so that the studies I talked about in my last answer can be done, and we can accomplish the establishment of a picture of what's going on. Now, as far as uniform sentencing, The law requires that judges, sentence not identically. They don't take the discretion away from the judge, and nobody is advocating for that. But there are certain factors that a judge is mandated by statute to take into consideration as to why they reach one sentence for one defendant and another sentence for another defendant that might be charged with the exact same crime. Things to be looked at is, background. Is this your first offense? Is this your 15th offense? What the size, for example, of the theft, or whatever the consequences of the criminal activity. Those are factors that a judge will always be able to take into consideration. But what we want to make sure is that we answer the question, is race a factor? There's people that have, a visceral response to that and say, absolutely, race is the factor. I don't have a basis to say yes or no. That's why we need that data.
You need that quantitative data.
Absolutely.
To get to the quality of work, for sure. I think, Chief, if we were to peel the onion even more, it sounds like that there is out there a mistrust of the system. There's a mistrust of the grand jury system. There's a mistrust of the courts. What steps are you taking to hopefully turn that tide so that the public can trust the courts and the judges?
I think the answer to that is transparency. And I don't know that I would say that there's a general, every judge is viewed that way with suspicion, or every court system. But yes, there are some in specific parts of our state and specific parts of the United States. So transparency. I am an advocate for cameras in the courtroom at every step of the proceedings. I believe that they should be in the United States Supreme Court. They should have cameras and recordings in all that they do as well. This is the Supreme Court of Ohio. We've had cameras in our courtroom since 2004, and all of our hearings are archived. So you can go back to 2004, 2005, whatever, and review a hearing, an oral argument that we had. You'll see what questions were asked, how they were responded to, etc. You can see a judge in action, so to speak, if you have that transparency. What we have now, because I guess it may be the silver lining of the COVID-19 pandemic, is that courts are relying on technology more so than they've ever been. And in earlier part in March, I set aside $6 million of my budget to be granted to the local courts so that they could come up to speed with technology. They could get their licensing, they could get, the equipment they needed, the technology to have remote hearings, to be on camera, etc. So the logical next step is, let's have that equipment used to live stream what you're doing in the court. And there are courts across this state that do just that. And we have a directory on the website of the Ohio Supreme Court that you can log on to and see what courts are putting that out there, or transparent and putting their proceedings on. You can click on it, and if they're having a hearing, you would be right there, viewing their hearing. Not all courts do this. This is an initiative that I am encouraging, and more courts are seeing the value of, and I think we're going to build that directory, and you're going to see more and more courts and I think that if people have the opportunity to see the judges that they elected in action on the bench, it's going to help them formulate a thought, an impression of how the courts operate.
With nothing lost in translation, right?
Exactly.
It's right there.
You're not looking at it through the eyes of a reporter, or newspaper article, or even the participants. You're viewing it for yourself.
Yeah. So I have so many more questions, but I do want to ask you this one last one. You say one way to change for the better, Chief, is for elected officials to take inventory of their performance individually and collectively. It's a tall order for some. I'm curious, what you did for yourself?
I try to be reflective on what I say and how it would be interpreted or applied. And I think that's important to do. I think it's also important for any official to realize that, and I say this to judges a lot, you're not just dealing with a case, you're dealing with a human being that has come to the court, either voluntarily or not, because they have a problem they can't solve for themselves. Realize that you are there to be a problem solver for the people that are before you. They may not like the solution all the time to the problem, especially if it's a criminal justice matter, but in order to solve that problem, you have to show competence, you have to show respect for the people that are standing in front of you, and you have to be fair in how and follow the law on how you decide the case, fashion a solution, have the parties come to a compromise. Those are all within the powers of the judiciary, and they should be used, thoughtfully. And I think that's a great start for self-reflection on how we all do our jobs.
Great guiding stick, for sure. Chief, thank you for not only your transparency today with our Take 10, but truly your compassion for what you do, but also for the people of Ohio. Your leadership has been proven time and time again. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Angela.